On in and have a seat. Welcome to Streams. Hey, my name is JP. I just got a couple of announcements for you here really quick. So if you're a guest, welcome. We're glad that you're here. If you haven't stopped by our welcome table, please do so. We're not want to make it awkward. We just want to say hi, get to know you a little bit. We got a little gift bag that's got some free Chick-fil-A in there for you. So stop on by and say hi if you haven't. All right, my first announcement. Ladies in the house. Ooh, we can work on that. You guys got some time. As you can see, April 19th and 21st is the women's retreat. So if you haven't signed up and you're like, hey, I want to go, sign up. It is going to be in Granite Hills Retreat there. It's going to be really nice. $165 is the price, okay? So April 19th to the 21st, there's still time to sign up. So don't delay. It's always a good time is what I hear. So, all right, in front of you, because anybody know what's coming up here pretty soon? There you go. All right, this side wins. 1-0, this side is up. Can you guys guess what's before that? No, I'm just kidding. There's nothing before that. Good Friday. I'm just kidding. That's right. But in front of you and outside, we have little Easter cards. Grab some of those. Take them out. Hand them to your neighbors, people at the grocery store, wherever you're at. Just invite somebody to church. It's a great time to come and just hear the word while we celebrate. But bring somebody that hasn't gone. And before that, on the 30th, we're going to actually be doing an glow-in-the-dark Easter egg hunt for all the older kids. All right, so last year we kind of kicked this off. It was pretty cool. We're going to make it even better this year, okay? So this is an opportunity for all the older kids to come, bring your friends, your neighbors, and hang out, find Easter eggs that are glowing in the dark, and we got music, we got it all. So come and hang out and do that. And then Good Friday, we got a Good Friday service at 5:30. And then Easter, we've got two services. We got at 8:15. We got at 10 o'clock. The child care is going to be available at 10:15. So the 10 o'clock service. So come and do that. And I'm going to welcome my man Tony Gardner to the stage to bring the word.
All right, there we go. I might just go with the handheld, we'll see. Forgive me, I lost my voice yesterday, and I don't know why. I promise I was not yelling at my kids. I didn't go to any I went to a baseball game, but it got rained out on Friday. I don't know what the deal was. I am blaming it on God has such a great message that he wants me to give that somebody doesn't want you to hear it. That's what I'm going to go with. All right, so today we're going to continue in our series on Joshua. But before that, I want to give you at least something that you learn that's apart from the Bible. Forgive me, I'm going to take drinks of water often, okay? So, oh, you get to hear it. Okay, yeah. Sorry, that's going to drive me nuts. Okay, so a little bit of outside of church knowledge for you today. There is a super secret club in Disneyland. So I am a big Disney fan. Me and my family, we go every year. It's like a family tradition for the five of us. And there is a very secret club there. It's funny because it's very secret, but yet, thousands of people know about it. It's called Club 33. Raise your hand if you've heard of Club 33. Okay, yeah. So it's pretty secret. So Club 33 it's an exclusive club. There's only about 500 members. I looked it up. It costs $35,000 to join the club, and it costs $15,000 annually to remain a member of the club. With that, you do get the opportunity to go eat dinner in the fancy restaurant that is Club 33. That all the rest of us who aren't paying $35,000 to join and so on, we don't get to go in there. The meals cost around $200 a person, and there is currently, I looked it up, right now there's like a 3 to 5 year wait list, I guess. Depending on how famous you are, maybe you can get to the 3 years, but there's a significant wait list to get into that club. Is there anybody here that's been in Club 33? I have. So, thank you. So some of you might remember previously I told you a story about how I snuck into the primetime Emmys. and I got all dressed nice, and I went to the Emmys, and I just kind of walked around until someone gave me like a souvenir badge thing, and then I pretended like that badge was like for real, and I just walked around confident so that people would not stop me. So same thing, me and my friend were at Disneyland, and I'm like, hey, have you heard of Club 33? And so I point out the door. And while we're standing there, it just happened to be perfect timing that someone decided to exit the restaurant. Now, the door has a doorbell. There's no knob. You can't just like open the door to get in. You got to ring the doorbell so someone lets you in. So someone steps out, and I was like, oh, look, there comes that family. Shoop. And I grabbed the door real quick before it shuts. And I'm like, come on. And so we run inside. I believe God wanted me to see this because there is a person, like a maitre d', who stands right there at the entrance, and there's this fancy glass elevator to go upstairs or take you up, and then there's like a spiral stairs that go around it. As we come through the door, there's no maitre d'. Oh, God wants me in here. So we quickly hustle on up the stairs, and we get to the top, and we walk around in the restaurant for a couple minutes, just kind of checking out the beauty of it. And then, of course, similar to my other story with the Emmys, we didn't know what to do. So I'm like, bathrooms. And so I took off to go to the men's bathroom. She took off to go to the women's bathroom. And I'm in there. And then I'm getting nervous because, in fancy restaurants, they have like the guy in there that you're supposed to tip because he gives you like lotion or cologne or whatever. So now I'm like, I'm going to get busted by the bathroom guy. I go in there. There's no bathroom guy. But they have embossed napkins for the towels to dry your hands that have the 33 logo on them. So I grab a grip of those, and I'm like shoving them in my pocket. I come out of the bathroom at the same time as my friend, and I'm like, did you see the napkins? And she goes, yeah. She pulls out a whole bunch that she grabbed too. And then we're just standing there, outside the bathroom, pretty conspicuous. And so a waiter walks by and says, can I help you? And I go, we were just looking around. And so he's like, okay, you guys need to get going. And he was polite about it. They didn't call the cops or anything. But then they escorted us down the stairs and we left. But again, in both of those stories, my experience was the best liars lie with confidence. You gotta sell it. You gotta convince the other person. You gotta kind of believe it yourself to get someone else to believe it. Now you're all thinking, this is a horrible message, Tony, that you're preaching on Sunday morning. We're gonna look at Joshua 9 in a minute. And Joshua 9 tells a story of when the leaders of Israel were lied to and how the people were good liars. They really worked hard to convince Joshua and the leaders of whatever they were trying to convince them of. First up, like a year or so ago, I preached a message, and I told you guys I'm going to give you 1 point, only 1 point. That's all you got to remember. And then, I don't know, I preached a few months later, and I was like, how many of you guys remember that point? And nobody did. So today's message has no points. This is a pointless message. So if you were going to take notes, don't bother. There are no points in this message whatsoever. I will give you some questions to think about, but no points. Okay, so I titled my message today, You've Been Lied To. Because that is the truth. You have been lied to, and it seems ironic to say that is the truth, but it is. You've been lied to. We're going to go through verse by verse. This seems like, I guess either way I'm speaking for a few minutes, but I decided we're going to read every verse on the Sunday that I don't have much of a voice. But we're going to go through every verse, and we'll stop a couple times here, and we're going to talk about some of the ideas. So this is Joshua 9. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of all the ites, Hittites, Canaanites, and so on, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. So there's all these other armies, all these other kings. They saw what they did to Jericho. They saw what they did to the city of Ai. I always find it interesting nowadays to call it AI because for us, that just means the robots. The robots are coming to take over. Back then, it was a city. But Joshua was winning these things left and right, and so then a bunch of kings decided, that's it, we're going to do this together. We're going to go against them together. However, the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done in Jericho and Ai, and so they resorted to a ruse. I guess some of you young people don't know what a ruse is. I highlighted it up there. A ruse is like a plan to trick someone, to fool them. I have been the object, I guess, or the victim of a ruse before. I mean, I've done my fair share. You guys have heard me tell stories about it. It's funny, too, because I think the first time I preached about stealing the Bob's Big Boy. And then, the second time was when I stole these Star Wars toys. I'm like, man, it's like confessional time when I'm up here. All these things that I shouldn't have done, trying to absolve myself. But I've been the victim of ruses before, too. I think I even mentioned this in a sermon previously where my first year in ministry, I was a youth pastor at a small little church in Washington, and some guy calls me up telling me that his wife is dying, and he wants to know if he can talk to me. So I go talk to him. While we're talking, he basically gives me this super lengthy story about how she has to have this procedure, he doesn't have the money, he can't borrow it, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, let me talk to my wife real quick. And he's like, and then he would flip out and get mad at me like I wasn't going to be helpful. So he was really preying on my youth and my naivete and my emotions. And so basically he convinced me to give him $180. That number sticks in my head. I'm sure Jen probably remembers that number too. Because I had to come home and say, hey, I gave this guy $180 today, and I'm pretty sure he just lied to me to trick me into giving it to him. And he did. He called me the next day. He wanted to get together again, and I believe it was just because he wanted to see if the well was dry. And I said something along the lines of, I didn't think I'd hear from you. I kind of feel like maybe yesterday you were just trying to get money out of me. And he flipped out and yelled at me on the phone and hung up on me. And I never saw him again to this day. And so I'm like, okay, so that is a guy who basically stole $180 from a servant of God using his emotions in that position. And so I could get mad about it, but I also could just look at it as I did the right thing. I tried to help the guy. I hope that he's blessed, and I hope that he does actually kind of recognize the error of his way. But all of us, I think, at different times in our lives have been victims of a ruse where someone has tried to trick us. This one that we're going to read about here that the Gibeonites came up with is pretty significant. We'll go to the next slide here. So they went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded and worn out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet, and they wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. I'm like, okay, so these guys were really trying to sell it. So to give you a little bit of understanding, sorry, pause for effect. All right. Only the front rows could hear that. So to give you some understanding, this would be like we were told to come take all of Phoenix. God said, go in there, take that land. That land is yours. Take all of Phoenix. It's yours. And so someone comes around, though, and they're in Tempe. And they come over to us, and they have a plan. And they're going to be the ones that try to trick us. And they're trying to make us believe that they actually came from Tucson, I guess we'll say, because that's not technically part of our valley. So they'll be like, look how far we came. Look at how worn out our clothes are. And so they're trying to convince them. They went to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, and they said to him and the Israelites, we have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us. So the important fact that needs to be understood before this is God told them, the promised land is yours. Take everything. And this is kind of hard to swallow because it's Old Testament stuff, but God was like, take everybody and kill them. Defeat everybody. Take the land. You don't go in there to make friends. You go in there because I'm giving you this land. Take it. But these people, the Gibeonites, were afraid, so they instead did this plan of we're going to try to go in there and lie and trick them into making a treaty with us. So I think we're on to the next slide now, slide 5. The Israelites and the Hivites, or said to the Hivites, perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you? In other words, we're supposed to kill you. Why would we make a treaty with you? They said, "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. Joshua asked them, "Who are you and where do you come from?" So he tries to get super direct at this point where he's not going to be distracted. They answered, "Your servants have come from a distant country." I'm like, man, Joshua, do you not hear that? They just keep saying distant country. So, it seems like I would start to pick up on, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. Because of the fame of your Lord, your God. So they're even trying to stroke Joshua's ego by praising his God a little bit. Because of how good your God is, we've heard about it in our far-off land. So we've come here. Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of your God. We've heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon and king of Heshbon, and Og king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth sounds like a fun place to live. Ashtaroth. All right. So they're again claiming that we come from this far country. Then they said, "Our elders and all those living in the country said to us, 'Take provisions on your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins, that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are? And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. Does anybody have some old crappy clothes at home?' Yeah, that's what they did. They just took out their crappy old stuff. And then they tried to pass it off like, we put this on days ago when we started coming here, even though it was yesterday morning. And they just walked around the block. So they're doing everything they can to convince him. So the next verse, this is the most pivotal verse in the whole story. I don't remember the number of the verse. Go ahead and pop it up there. It must be 14. The Israelites sampled their provision, but they did not inquire of the Lord. So in other words, we know the last part is the more poignant, powerful part. They didn't inquire of the Lord. But the first part matters too, because basically the first part was they relied on their own knowledge. They're like, well, let's see your provisions. Let's see this dry and moldy bread. Ooh, that is moldy. Yeah. Let me see your cracked wine skins. Like they took it upon themselves to investigate to see if it was true, and they just trusted their own eyes rather than taking it to the Lord. So here we come to my first question for the morning. Now, this is a question, not a point. Don't be confused, because there's no points to this message. When is the last time you inquired of the Lord? As I was preparing for this and reading it over and really struck by that verse, I thought to myself, when was the last time I have inquired of the Lord? Now, I do believe God cares about everything in our lives, even small things, because if they matter to us, they matter to him. However, I don't need to be asking God today when we're done, are we going to Subway or are we going to Freddy's? I don't think God cares. That's not something I need to inquire of the Lord. Now, one small caveat, it is possible that God might have someone he needs me to run into at one of those restaurants, and he needs me to be able to connect with them. So sometimes God does make those things work out. But in general, things like that, that's not necessarily like the most important thing to inquire of the Lord. Changing a job, sometimes making a decision, especially when it comes to relationships, any decision that comes to relationships, that needs to be an inquiry of the Lord. Even if it's not, and when someone's up here, they're usually talking about relationships. A lot of times they talk about husbands and wives or like single people finding the right person. There's a lot of romantic ideas, I feel like, with relationships, but all relationships. For me, with my kids, my decisions I make with them, I need to be inquiring of the Lord. Because if I want to be the best dad that I can and give them the best example of God, I need to be inquiring of him about what I should do. If I want to be the best friend or brother to someone at my job or at my church, if it's something that has to do with a relationship between you and me, I should be inquiring of the Lord about that. So here's what I'm going to do. This is a teaching strategy. Idina, you'll like this. We're going to use a teaching strategy here. I'm going to give you a minute or two, and I just want you to think about the last time you inquired of the Lord. And I'm going to see if anyone's willing to tell us what you inquired of the Lord about. Okay? Yeah, I know, it's going to be tough. So I'm going to give you a moment. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. I'm going to drink some water, let my voice get ready for, the last 45 minutes that I've got. I'm just kidding. It's not. All right, so go ahead and take a moment, think about it, and I'll see if any of you want to tell me. This is good. This is probably feeling a little awkward for you because everybody, we all in church, if someone's not talking, we got to bow our heads or something. We got to look biblical here. Now, I understand that, that could feel like the longest minute or minute and a half in church because you're just sitting there and no one's actually talking. But I think it is important for us to actually take a moment and think about what we're taking to the Lord. Is there anybody in here that's had a recent thing that they maybe do want to share where they took it to the Lord? Hey, all right, Sally. Ooh, now I'm like, Merv Griffin. Who knows Merv Griffin?
Well, a week ago, I had to decide if I was signing my school contract. And I was praying and praying. I did take it to the Lord. But the self came in. And the self wanted to, just quit on the spot. But my contract had to be signed by 4 o'clock, and I waited to 3 o'clock. And what happened, I went and I read my daily devotion. And it told me that I am to not do things on my own, by self. I am to wait on the Lord because God knows the journey and the path that he has for me. And so I went and I signed my contract at 3 o'clock after I read my devotion. That was his answer.
Perfect. And that's a great example of something that is a big decision for your life that you want to give a little bit of thought to. Okay, I was going to say one more, but you guys saw Bill. He put his hands up, so.
I inquired of the Lord about a job offer to me. And at first I said, oh, that's great, because I had applied for it at the motor vehicle inspection station. And it sounded really good, like a very good offer. But I talked with Edie, and then I began to pray, and I said, God, what is this? And he just spoke my heart. It was some portions of the job would be very dangerous with some of the conditions that I have in my body. So I called the lady, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't take the job. And she was very nice. So that's fine. Thank you for letting me know.
Hey, so another great aspect of that, you talked to Edie. So I'm going to recommend to everybody, if you need to inquire of the Lord, get Edie's phone number too. I'm kidding. But it is it's a righteous thing to do, to seek the wise counsel of other believers. When you're inquiring of the Lord, it doesn't have to just be prayer for some sort of, mystic spiritual answer that you somehow feel in your heart. That can happen. But it could also be asking the believers around you, get some insight, get some other people's perspective. When it comes to inquiring of the Lord, it's that. I wonder sometimes with Joshua and the leaders, if there was one of them in that group that was like, this seems like a bad idea. Nobody else is saying anything, I'm not going to say anything. I wonder if there was anybody in that group that felt that way. But for us, we need to be inquiring of the Lord as much as we can on anything that has to do with relationships. All right, so we're going to get back to it. So now we're going to go to verse 15 or 16. Joshua made a treaty of peace. Am I on the right one? Yeah. He made a treaty of peace with them to let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were actually their neighbors who lived near them. So the Israelites set out on the third day and came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, if it's a PH, I guess, and those other two. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. So they were supposed to attack. That was God's clear direction. You're supposed to attack, but now they made a treaty which violates God's direction for them. So the next slide, moving on. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders. Is anybody in here in your job, you have a job that's in leadership? So in my job, I have students that get mad at me because I'm an assistant principal. I am Ed Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, I am, nobody likes me. I mean, I get along with the students, but like, I have students that really don't like me. It would be comforting if the parents all liked me, but usually the parents, a lot of times, they also have their own complaints. Some of them are very, rational, but some parents, they're just like, they hate me as much as their kids. But at least I have the teachers. The teachers love me. No, but it's like, there are times in my job that, yes, I upset people or whatever, but there's also times that are fulfilling. I don't want to paint a wrong picture. I don't want to lie to you. But, yeah, in leadership, decisions you make are often going to make lots of people mad. And so now Joshua and the leaders have the whole assembly, it says, grumbling at them. They answered, "We've given them an oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly." So the leader's promise to them was kept. So it's interesting because forever, for a couple centuries or so, Israel was slaves in Egypt. God delivers them from slavery. He takes them out of Egypt, crosses the Red Sea. They wander for a few years, 40 of them to be precise. Then they get the promised land, and now they're going in there mistake-free. They're taking the land. Oh, wait, these guys want a treaty. Okay, we'll make a treaty with you. So now what are we going to do? We're going to make them our slaves, and we're going to make them take care of our needs. And so it says that Joshua basically kind of solidified that decision. So Joshua summons the Gibeonites, and he said, "Why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you? Well, actually, you live near us. You are now under a curse." You guys ever think that about other people sometimes? I have to admit I do. Usually it's on the road. Okay, so we're going to go to confession time. Sometimes I do wish I had the power to curse people, and it's usually when I'm on the road driving, because I get really mad at someone, and I'm like, "You're going to have a bad day." Anyway, now y'all are going to be like, "I hope I don't run into Tony on the road." He says, "You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land." So they basically knew the plan. They knew that they were coming to wipe them out and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. "So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this." This was interesting to me, though, in the story. They say, "We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So I even thought, well, then why didn't you just go ahead and slaughter them then? Because they basically say, you do what you got to do. I think Joshua still felt like because we made a promise, we can't go back on that. And so they stuck with this idea of you're going to be our slaves, basically, for the future. So then the next verse, Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. So that brings me to my next question. What are you close to, and what are you far from? Do you know your neighbors? And I'm not talking about your house where you live, like the people next door. I know Wasim and Denise. I know Rob and Tracy. I know like a bunch of my neighbors. I'm not talking about that. Do you know what you're close to? Are you close to sorrow? Does pain live next door? Like there are things in our lives that we let remain close to us. And the truth is, we have control over how close they are. And sometimes I think we forget what we're actually close to. If sorrow or pain or anger, if those things are your neighbor, then you need to remember that grace is your roommate. Mercy actually lives in you. You know what mercy smells like. I know that was like a joke in a serious time. You've got things like grace, God's power, mercy, joy. Those are the things that God has given to you. But sometimes we choose to let sorrow live in our house, or we choose to let regret or shame. So we're going to do this one more time. Michael, do you have something maybe a little bit more jazzy, peppy? But I'm going to ask for, again, some elbow partner music. We're going to go to elbow partners this time. You're not thinking, you're talking. I assume you came to church with someone that you know and that you kind of enjoy to talk to sometimes. So this will be a little less awkward. I'm going to give you 2 minutes this time. I want you to talk to the person next to you about what you think you're close to or what you think you are far from. Again, not talking people, talking about those ideas of pain, joy, sorrow, happiness, confidence in the Lord. Okay? All right, you got 2 minutes. Let's go. It's like Olive Garden. When you're here, you're family. All right, about 20 more seconds. All right. So hopefully what you guys were just experiencing is what you will do today when you go to Barrows or Payway or whatever. I know that like Jen and I, when we go out to lunch sometimes after church, we'll talk about something from the message. And the convenient thing for you today is there's no points to talk about. But there are some questions. And questions are great for starting discussions. And I think it is important and valuable for all of us at times to think about, am I letting sorrow, or am I letting pain, am I letting my own guilt or shame, have too much of a footing in my life? It's important for us to think about those things and to remember how much grace actually is poured out on us. Okay, so the last question, and what I'm going to use to wrap up, so I don't even, at this point, I know it's usually, well, let's just go ahead and I'll let the band come on up if they want, even if they don't want. I'm trying to sound polite, but it's a. So my final question is one that I do feel like should be the most important one, is who's lying to you now? So if I go with the idea of my message being titled, You've Been Lied To, I think it's important for you, each of us, to think, who is lying to me now? Is my boss lying to me, telling me that you won't regret putting in the extra hours? Look at the money we'll give you. Maybe. Television is lying to us every day, telling us how much happier we'll be if we just buy this product. Politicians, they lie sometimes. I mean, there are so many different people in our lives that lie to us every day. And ultimately, all of those lies are coming from one being, and that's Satan. Satan is the prince of all lies, and he is trying to get everybody to lie all the time. And what he's hoping is that we'll believe some of those lies. But what's the one way we can overcome and figure out the truth? Inquiring of the Lord. God is never going to lie to us. God is going to be the one that gives us that insight and gives us that answer. So my prayer today is that as you go to lunch, as you go about your day, that you have a chance to have a little bit more conversation around the idea of who's lying to me and how can I better inquire of the Lord. Does that bless you guys? All right, good deal.